Thank you all so much for being here. Thank you so much to our speakers, Averil and Nicole. I'll introduce them in a second. First of all, I suppose I'll introduce you all here today to this Breakfast Club session. I don't know if we have any newbies in the house. You're all very welcome. So for context, we're here as part of the Leadership Academy, a space for leaders from across the nonprofit sector at all stages in their leadership journey to come together to learn from and inspire each other. And I heard you all doing that already this morning, so thank you. The Leadership Academy provides opportunities to have conversations about the key leadership challenges and to find relevant cutting-edge leadership development opportunities, networking, training, information and support. The Leadership Academy Breakfast Club series, which you're in right now, are regular meetings where anyone in the sector interested in leadership development, their own and others, has the opportunity to hear from a wide variety of people with leadership stories and to discuss leadership challenges and opportunities in the sector. Breakfast clubs are for anyone at any stage in their leadership development journey. So part of the goal for the breakfast club is to introduce people at various stages in their own journey so people can learn and engage. So if you have someone else in your organisation who you think might be interested, absolutely let them know about the next one. Each event is in two parts, so we'll have a panel discussion this morning, followed by facilitated round tables. So we have some facilitators planted around in the audience. Thank you in advance to them. And each session is based on an overarching leadership theme. Since December 2022, we've hosted over 400 participants at 10 meetings of the Breakfast Club. We've covered topics such as mental health, succession planning, emerging leaders, moral courage, and today we're delving into organisational culture. Thank you. So I'm going to introduce our speakers. So to my immediate left, we have Averil Power. Averil is the CEO of the Irish Cancer Society. She's a former senator and ministerial advisor with over 20 years experience in leadership, policy and communications. As the CEO of the Irish Cancer Society, Ireland's national cancer charity, she has successfully led the organisation through major change and positioned it for long-term success. They are the most trusted charity in Ireland and one of the top 25 employers in the country. So throughout her career, Averil has led with passion on issues of equality, diversity and inclusion. She was a key figure in Ireland's 2015 marriage equality referendum campaign and has a strong track record of promoting gender equality and tackling socio-economic disadvantage. And then over there, we have Nicole Dunne, the Managing Director of Mantra Strategy. She has extensive experience in both the private and non-profit sector in large organisations ranging from BMW to UNICEF, Focus Ireland. She serves on a number of boards and was chair of the Charities Institute of Ireland. She established Mantra Strategy in 2020, which provides leadership and strategy consulting and development. Nicole is a strong advocate for change in society, specifically neurodiversity, autism and gender equality. So welcome, both of you. Thank you. So, just check my time. So we'll kick off with the discussion. Like I said, we're going to have a chat up here, then we're going to break into our breakout rooms and we'll come back for some Q&A from the audience towards the end when we wrap up. So I'll kick off with you, Averil, if that's okay, because you're closest to me. So when we were coming up with this event based on organisational culture, we wanted to invite somebody who had direct experience of developing good organisational culture. So Irish Cancer Society featured in the Sunday Independent's list of best employers in Ireland 2021, 22 and 23. Fantastic. No mean feat for a non-profit. So can you start off by telling us what organisational culture means to you as a leader and the Irish Cancer Society and what you've done to achieve this?
Thanks, Sinead, and good morning, everybody. So I know there's so many different definitions of culture, and sometimes it can seem quite abstract. I guess for me, it's the values that are held by the people in an organisation and the behaviours, I guess, that are driven by those values. And I think in a great culture, you have alignment, everybody shares the same values, and those are positive ones. And I think in a bad culture, when you don't have that, people still have their own values, and lots of those could be positive values, but you get conflict where people can't see that reflected in the organisation, or where there are competing values within the organisation. I think particularly if they can't see the tone, if the tone from the top isn't consistent with either the organisation's stated values on the page. You know, you say that you've about collaboration or compassion or lots of other positive things, as of course we all are in the NGO sector. But if people can't see that reflected in how your leaders behave and how colleagues, I think, even treat each other, then I think that's when your culture is out of alignment. And for me, that's the most important thing in an organization. I think strategy is really important, and I'm someone who believes in having a strong vision and all that, and putting the building blocks in place to deliver that. But I think if your culture is wrong, you just, like we all know, and I know it's like thrown out like all the time. It's as if maxim, but like Drucker's phrasing that culture eats strategy for breakfast, but like it eats motivation, it eats energy, it like literally will eat every other part of the organization if you can't get the culture right. And I do think that for me has been the biggest learning for me as a leader, and I would say it's the thing that has driven all of our success as an organization, is that I do feel that now we've done a lot of work, but that now our team genuinely live our values. And I think the key one for me is probably compassion, both for the people that we serve, but also for each other. And I think that for me, and people would tell me that is now how they feel, that would, like we look after people when they're having difficult times at home. We give each other slack. I'm one of your speakers, and I got here just in time this morning because I have a 3-year-old who was throwing up all night, and I've mostly female staff, and we give each other slack for things like that. If I had to reschedule a meeting, people would understand that, and I'll do the same for a colleague. And I do think it's simple things like that, even people feeling that there's, understanding of what else is going on in their lives, and that's reflected in the organization.
Great, thank you very much. Lisa Nicole, when you were chatting to Sharon about your work in strategy and leadership, you told her about how this work has led you into the space of working with leaders on their organizational culture. So it's an interesting connection. Can you tell us a bit more about the work that you do and how you found yourself in the space and why it is so important?
Yeah, great. Thanks a million. I mean, I think everyone knows that they go hand in hand. Strategy. We started Mantra thinking, we'll just go off and help organizations devise this really purposeful strategy and away they'll go. But the disconnect between what's happening on the ground and the expectation of a strategy was very clear. And often, I think with a lot of our clients, the next natural step was to work on bringing the organization more together on the same page, making sure everybody could, as Averil said, know the values and understand the strategy and be behind it and fully onboarded with it. But that's only the start. And I think that was the key thing. So we started looking at mapping emotional culture within the organization. And I know a lot of people kind of go, get the idea of us really talking about our feelings at work and stuff. But, ultimately feelings play such a big role in how motivated we are and how we treat people and how we show up. So we've been mapping emotional culture with organizations now, and what we found is, you really get under the bonnet, you properly find out what's going on, and only when you do name it can you actually address what the rituals, behaviors, activities need to be to feel better and more motivated at work and to be more productive. So that's been really interesting. Obviously, from working in the sector myself, I know we also have a bit of ick or don't like the word high performance as a kind of concept, as in we feel it's very corporate. But actually, high performance is only really possible when our culture is right, and when we have an inclusive culture, when we actually make sure that work where we spend a third of our lives, kind of depressing, a third of our lives, making sure that that's, a positive or more broadly positive than negative experience for everyone actually does create high performance. So they are intertwined. So that disconnect again is a language thing, not really, for me anyway. I think strategy and culture hand in hand, inclusive and high performance hand in hand, and it all comes back to the people and making sure people are in the right environment.
Great stuff. Thank you very much. Okay, we'll crack into some questions now. So I have some interesting notes here, so I'm really excited to hear what you have to tell me. So we'll start off, pretty basic. Who in the organization is responsible for good organizational culture? And Lisa Nicole, I think you have a good story here.
Well, God, I can't remember yesterday, so I definitely can't remember the conversation with Sharon, but I always have a story. I guess the main thing is that, you know, in the same way as we're all leaders, and it doesn't matter what role you play, we are all responsible for culture. And I think exactly what Averil said, how we are with each other is the culture, and whether or not the organization, in inverted commas, the leadership, the management, whether they create culture or not, you will have a culture. So culture is the de facto what happens around here. And so I think it's everybody's job to be aware, check in with themselves. How am I treating others? How am I, after there's a bit of an announcement or news or communication, how am I responding to that? And having a little confab in a sidebar room is contributing to the culture, you know? So I think it's everybody's job. And I think it absolutely should be part of the board and leadership, setting the tone. And it is absolutely the role of the CEO, in my opinion, to make sure they call out bad behavior, poor culture, disrespect in a supportive and positive and encouraging way until it needs to be addressed differently. But it's also all of our jobs, no matter what your role is, it's all of our jobs to lead and change and shape the culture. And I see a few HR people here as well. Like, obviously, you know, we're complex, and so we need a bit of organization and we need people corralling us. But actually, it's for everyone to live the values. So right across the board.
Thank you so much. Do you have anything to add to that, Averil?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose a lot of what I would say would be the same. Like, I think it's both. I think you have to set the tone at the top, but then we also all have to hold ourselves accountable. You know, the CEO isn't in every meeting. They're not there for, you know, how people are treating each other, whether they're being genuinely inclusive in meetings or not, or you know, treating colleagues with respect or with compassion. So I think it's important to have both. But I do, so in terms of like the leadership role, I think, you know, as a leader, you are under the spotlight. People are looking at you all the time to see whether you're really, you know, in your own behaviours, you're really living those values. And I do think it's important that they can see that. You know, and that if you say, for example, that you're a person-centered organization, that you're there for the people that your organization exists to serve. So for us cancer patients, that they can see that that's my, you know, North Star, that's what guides all my decisions. They can really feel that, and that they can also see that, you know, I'm treating other people with trust, with respect, with compassion. One of the things, I think also the broader leadership team, because I think it needs to cascade down. And while everybody, you know, you're right, everybody is responsible. I think within teams, the culture within a department or within a team, particularly in a large organization, is set by the leader at that level. So again, like this, the CEO can have all the, you know, right values and behaviors, but if the way the department is being led in a big organization isn't consistent with that, then the experience of the people in that team won't be what you would wish it to be. So one of the things that we've done as a leadership team is a lot of coaching, and I would say soul searching and emotions and difficult conversations. But one of the things that we've done is to try, you know, as a team, to make sure that like we're building trust amongst each other, that we found language for, and that we found ways of managing that. You said, you know, maybe tension between high performance and compassion, but like for me, they're equally as important. And I also feel very strongly about it. And I think one of the reasons the Irish Cancer Society has been successful in terms of fundraising through COVID and things like that is that I also run the organization like a business. You know, like you have to invest in, and I'm also very conscious with this audience that we're in a really privileged position, right? So we can invest in marketing. All of our funding, 95% of our funding comes from public fundraising. We get a little bit of funding from the state, but not much. So I don't have the issues that I know the Wheel has been or campaigning on in terms of pay parity and the restrictions of being a primarily public funded organisation. But we've been able to invest in marketing, branding, governance, digital innovation and fundraising and services. So like all of that is important as well. And I do think like that value for money piece and that innovation and, you know, excellence is something that's really important. to me. And I do think that has to be, like, for me, being a charity doesn't mean that it's just good enough, that what you do is good. It needs to be excellent, and I do think that's important. But it is about how you marry that with compassion and understanding, and also being a nice place to work, so that you're not so driven, that you're not looking after each other. And we've done a lot of work, as I say, with coaching to be able to figure that out as a leadership team, so that we can cascade that down.
Thank you. And interesting what you say as well about it trickling down to your service users, community, whatever it is. Like, that's a really interesting observation. And then just about investing in organizational culture, how much investment should be made? I mean, bearing in mind the sector is time and cash poor, you know, what would be kind of the tips?
I mean, I think it's worth saying that no matter what your budget is, it's about prioritization and putting it as a core kind of focus. So, you know, it's very easy to say, oh, you need to put aside X amount of the budget if you have that luxury and a budget, but it's not about that. It's actually, you know, it's actually about making it just part of the way you operate and setting the tone. So I do think Averil's spot on, like, investing in people is a key part of it, investing in leadership development, but also you can take a coaching approach to things without having to have huge external input. You can, you know, there's so much good stuff available. There's so many things even through the wheel, and that there's loads of opportunities for us to just understand tips and things that have worked for others. You can bring the purpose of the organization back to the forefront at every meeting by starting every meeting's agenda with the purpose, impact, and how are we doing kind of conversation. It can be about one-to-ones and check-ins. This doesn't have to cost money. It's about making it the way you do things. Of course, if there's budget, you should be investing plenty of budget in it, getting under the bonnet and understanding it. The reality is the opportunity cost, if you don't do it, is so great. I mean, ultimately, we all know of organizations who are amazing, but they're creaking or they're dysfunctional or they're, you know, we all know them, and that's because they probably haven't spent enough time on the minding each other. Like, that doesn't mean massive investment in wellness programs. It doesn't mean we have to try and compete with LinkedIn and its amazing facilities, but it does mean we can just, you know, make it part of the way we work. And sorry, I know Tony, the Money Pony, is out there. That's a really good example of it came up in my conversation with Sharon and Averil earlier in our planning. Like, that's just about us all kind of recognizing how we show up. And so somebody told me, a wise man once told me they had an actual poster on the wall of Tony, the bony pony with the long face. And they used to occasionally defer to Tony and say, you know, just if they were having a really bad day or conflict is good, but if they were being conflicting and arguing in a less helpful or healthy way, they would invest their time, even if they weren't investing their money, on just checking in on that and being aware of where they're at and how they show up for each other, as well as for all of your users and service users.
I think, like, if I can, I think there's one thing that you can do that costs nothing, but as part of your performance management, that you include your values and your culture, and that's part of the conversation, because it's not just about targets, it's not just about metrics. It is about whether you're, like, for me in our sector, it is about whether, like, all of us are focused on the needs of service users, whether that is actually the core, and how we treat the people that we interact with, that our organisation serves, but also how we treat each other. And I think making that part of the performance conversation is something that you can do that would at no cost. And another thing that we did recently that I thought that was really nice, actually, because we've done a lot of work on our culture and our values. And recently we had a staff workshop. Our staff team meeting was around values, and asking each members that we did, it was a workshop where people talked about the values and what they meant to them personally. And I thought it was really nice to see that maybe some of the work that we've invested, you can now see people saying that it's collaborative, that it's compassionate, giving personal examples of when they felt that, and also how they've how they've responded when they haven't felt that. And I think that accountability is really important as well. It's building in, giving people the language that they're able to, whether it's joking about Tony, Moni Pony, or other ways, that when people feel that expectation hasn't been met, that you've enough trust within the team. Yeah. And enough accountability that people are able to raise that in a constructive way. So I agree. I think conflict is actually really important, but I think it's about giving people the language and the skills to be able to challenge each other and have difficult conversations, but in a way that feels supportive, rather than just critical. And I think that's a key part of it as well.
Great. And then when it gets a bit sticky, so we've talked about empowering people and, all our nice feelings and things. So, but some people would be a bit cynical maybe about the, soft skills and improving importance of organizational culture and things like that. So what are the risks then if we just don't move towards improving our cultures or even acknowledging it?
I mean, I think you only need one really bad environment or one really bad boss to know what you can't work within. And the risk of this not being addressed by leadership is that everybody else around them becomes totally deflated. Things aren't feeling fair. They're not supported. If the parity and accountability isn't held across different departments, people really start actually almost managing each other, but they just do that. And that becomes really toxic. And obviously a toxic environment and that word I don't use lightly, but an environment where it's, picky, there's blame, there's a lot of kind of finger pointing or just judging and lack of support is not good for anyone. And so the danger is, of course, as we know, we lose people quicker than we already are. I mean, people aren't staying anyway in jobs as long. So the dangers are so significant, but also I think people need to think about what's good and what's right for them. We can always try and change things no matter where we are, but if that isn't working and you don't have the support of leadership, obviously, you need to think about your own mask on first and what's good for me and so on as well. So, but there's loads of risks. I think you have to act on it. Leadership has to act on it. But also you need to address these things. I think a lot of the time we're afraid to raise complaints or issues but I think you can do it in a way, have a coffee with somebody, sit down and just say, look, this is kind of making me feel a certain way. Can we look at this? How are we going to work around it and be collaborative? And, just trying to take some ownership for driving that forward to a more positive scenario as well.
Thank you. Do you have anything to add there, Averil?
I think I would agree with all of that. And I know we're all struggling, and all employers right now are struggling with retention. And it's absolutely true. People don't leave, they say people don't leave organizations, they leave people, whether that's an awful boss who's giving you a hard time or a terrible colleague and you just can't have them in your ear complaining all day. It's not, nobody wants to work in an environment like that. So I think there's a huge imperative there in that environment for all employers, including NGOs, to take that on. I do think there's something about equipping people at all levels with the skills, as you said, to deal with conflict. And I think particularly when if you're trying to become a more diverse and inclusive organization, diversity, and I think including there's diversity of background and diversity of thought. And I would say that we now have quite a diverse leadership team with people who've come from different sectors, people with different styles, and I guess you get that in every organization. You have people who want to work fast, people who are slower, you have the extroverts, the introverts, you have the people who are happy to, when we're having a group decision, you have the people who are happy to brainstorm in the room, and the ones who get really stressed by that and want to be able to go off and think about it. And I think if you really want to have a diverse organization and benefit from all that, you need to find the skills. And I've certainly seen when we've had conflicts as a result of just not understanding each other, not understanding people's different personalities, their different approaches, their sensitivities. And that's why I think coaching for us as a team has been really important, but also we've worked, and not all of that has come at great cost. Some of that has just been team workshops we've had. As an NGO, you'll get lots of people who are willing to help you for free as well in this sector. But within teams, we've done work on that in terms of trying to understand people's individuals' personalities. I think I find conflict arises a lot actually, when it's not necessarily that somebody has negative motivations or that they're a negative person. People get the hump for all kinds of reasons and misunderstandings. And I find misunderstandings often happen between two well-intentioned people who just aren't communicating properly. So I think giving people the language to communicate at all levels and to be able to kind of deal with each other properly and navigate through those situations heads off an awful lot, and that doesn't have to come at a great cost.
Thank you very much. You've both indicated the importance of inclusion and belonging, and we heard about your commitments to equality and diversity in your work. So can you outline why organizational culture is so important to this?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think we all know it and believe it. I mean, it's I think for me anyway, it's about it's dual thing. There's a lot of need for us to be open, thinking differently, and representing and reaching out and into much wider pools of talent, but also into better representation of the people we serve and so on. And loads of reasons to do it. And I don't think in this room we need to do any sort of business case for it. But certainly what I would say is, for me, it's about recognizing that means we also have to be in tune and open to the fact that might mean we have to not expect us to perform business or to expect things to be done in the exact same way as before. Because if we're properly including, as Averil says, greater diversity of thought, difference, age, backgrounds, nested environments being different, conversation at a coffee cooler will be different, the way people engage with each other will be different, how we do our one-to-ones needs to reflect the fact that not everyone wants to be eyeballed in a room face to face. So I think we have to lead differently, and we have to equip our managers and skill them to manage differently, so that actually everybody is managed and trusted and supported. I was recently doing a workshop actually in a law firm, and they're really, really good on diversity and inclusion, but they probably, it came up about somebody comes in and when they're being onboarded and what's expected of them, and they're kind of just thrown in the deep end a little bit, the graduate program, and it's brilliant and everybody's treated equally. And I was like, yeah, but how do they feel when you're just asking them to go out and arrive at people's desks and whatever? Like, that isn't allowing for, it may be all walks of life, all comfort zones, neurodiversity and so on. And so they just weren't even aware and hadn't thought about it in that way before. So for me, it's like, we need to do this, but we need to realize that means we can't expect everyone to communicate in the exact same way. And if somebody's a bit shorter in an email or whatever, we can't just get the hump straight away and fly off the handle the way, we have to realize that people are so much more comfortable in different ways to maybe how we're used to doing things. So it's really important, but it's also a learning curve. And I think we've got to be prepared to be a bit uncomfortable in that before it gets much, much better.
Yeah, I agree. I think, there's a lot of emphasis maybe on diversity, but diversity is nothing without inclusion. There's no point in bringing people in and then saying we've a more diverse team if you're not actually giving everybody an equal opportunity to contribute. And equal doesn't mean the same, as you said, it's recognizing difference, and it's accounting for difference, and it's holding yourself accountable. I think even when you're chairing a meeting, is it the same people that talk all the time? Are you actually making sure that you're bringing out different voices and that everybody feels comfortable to challenge? I think that's actually really, really important. And the other thing that I'm passionate about is people being able to bring them full selves to work. And that's not just about, of course, it is about sexual orientation or gender, or if somebody's, if they're from the traveller community or whatever, it could different cultural backgrounds. But it's also about people being able to be open about what's going on for them at an individual level. And I do think, and I know I mentioned that at the start, but I do think that's really crucial, because I think your people need to feel that you understand and care about them as individuals. and that you look after them. And I always see that, like, the employer relationship, it's a two-way one. And I think it's not just about what, our people, what our team, our staff, our volunteers do for us. I think there is a responsibility to treat people with decency and compassion and look after them. And if something's going on for them, if they've a bereavement, or if they've something else, or they're going through fertility treatment or whatever it is for them, that they should feel free to actually be able to say that. And I think that's when you have a good culture as well, is when people can be honest and open about the things that are affecting them personally, and both feel that they'll get support for that, but also that it won't be held against. Like, I've been in organizations where people worry about saying things like that because maybe there's a promotion coming up and they feel you'll think they're not able for it because there's other things going on. And I think a truly great organization is one where people of all different backgrounds are able to, and all different personal experiences outside work, can be open if they want. I'm not saying everybody has to be, but if they want, they can be open at work, genuinely bring them their full selves in, and feel appreciated and supported for that. And I think when you have that, your team will deliver, 10 times more for you if they feel genuinely valued and supported than you'll ever get through strategy plans and all the other kind of formal business stuff that, of course, you have to have. But I think if you look after people, they'll deliver for you in spades.
And just to come back in on that, I think I started by talking about the disconnect between strategy and culture, but I think there's still a big disconnect between us saying that. And, I think it's clear that some organizations are doing this really well, but we know from talking to people across various underrepresented groups that they still aren't comfortable at interview or for job progression, for opportunity of work distribution. Even if they say they have something going on, they'll be bypassed. Or if they say, I need to work at home right now because of X, they'll suddenly not get the next project that comes up or the next opportunity, and they'll be bypassed. So this is really, or if they miss 3 months of work for mental health reasons because they did what was right for them, because we're talking about wellness, and we say own mask first, but then they take 3 months out and they go for the next job. We as employers are still notoriously bad for actually making the allowances for that and not looking for a reason on the CV. So I think we have to really say, are we doing what we said we would do? And if somebody has had a break, career break or otherwise, for very good reasons, they shouldn't have to disclose that. It should be okay in our culture now that we just say, actually look at all the experience they have and bring them in, give them opportunity. So I think there's still a way to go. Yeah.
And I think even letting people decide themselves what they're comfortable with, because I've been in conversations again with well-meaning people and good people who'd say, well, let's not ask her to do that because we know there's something else going on. And I think that is, for me, not fair. Like, that's unjust because you're making decisions for somebody else. I think you need to be able to acknowledge what's going on with someone, but then ask them, maybe they'd like a promotion right now because they want to have, work is the positive thing that's going on in their life and they're dealing with a lot of challenges outside. But I think it's holding ourselves accountable sometimes in those situations where if a promotion comes up and we say, oh, we can't ask that person because we know they've had a bereavement, or we can't ask them because there's something else going on. I think it's just challenging all of that and being genuinely person-centered and making sure that we're going with what our people actually want themselves rather than our judgments for them.
Quite clear now why Irish Cancer Society is one of the top 25 employers in the country, I think. But you've said, at least Nicole, you said it's, this is a journey and it's a learning curve. Like, this isn't a case of you write up an organizational culture document and then that's it. It gathers dust forever.
No, I think it's a work in progress always, where people are involved. We have people coming and going. We have people at different stages. It is about regrouping and keeping it live. Like anything, like your strategy, it should be live. It's not just a document on a shelf. But I do think it starts by doing a bit of a check-in. Temperature check, culture audit, emotional culture mapping, call it whatever you want. How are people feeling? How are they doing? And then, are you attracting the right talent? What are people on the outside thinking about you? And so is there a way for you to really gauge are you living up to what you say? And even with recruitment, and I know we weren't talking specifically about that, but we know culture is a big draw for people. Like, I want to work somewhere. In fact, I think I read Culture Amp is something I follow a lot of around workplace, and they said 54% of parents would be willing to take a pay cut for the right culture, a family-friendly culture. So we really care about this in terms of what jobs we go for. And I don't think this sector is doing enough justice to itself in terms of wearing our heart on our even job descriptions, on our ads, putting our word out there around what we are and those benefits and the culture and the support and the compassion, because that is something that other sectors can learn from us. We're much higher on all the Gallup and Culture Amp studies in this space around purpose and connection to cause. And we need to really make sure that we are living it, but also, leverage it, because that's what makes this sector magic, and we want to keep that magic.
We've talked quite a bit about sort of leaders at a higher level, I suppose. So maybe just to focus a bit more on, because we have people in the room here who come to these breakfast clubs and are part of the Leadership Academy, who are at all levels of their leadership journey. They've just literally just started in the sector out of college or what have you. So there may well be people who feel they're operating within a culture that isn't particularly ideal. And they don't feel they have the authority or the power to make any changes. So what would be your advice to them? I'll start with you.
Run. I'm only messing.
I suppose it depends on how bad it is, right? And I do agree with what Nicole said about, like, you have to look after yourself. And I think, there are different levels of whether somebody can actually influence the culture in an organization. Like, I wouldn't join one where I felt the culture was really awful. And I think if you're not at a leadership level and you're in an individual team, I think it is difficult. You can influence it within your team. You can model good behaviors. You could talk to your boss. You can talk to the CEO. You can do all that. But I do think it's more difficult to change. And I think it's soul destroying. And I've seen people destroyed by working in toxic environments. So I do think it's challenging.
There is a point where you do run.
Yeah, but there is something in there is something in the fact that people, I think, it's not just the boss, that sets that. Like, we all know that, it can be the receptionist, it could be, in anybody in the organization, and the kindness. And I'm a big believer in kindness, right? And I think sometimes you're having a bad day and somebody's nice to you. And then you feel, you feel nice, and then you're nicer to the next person. So, like, I do think kindness can multiply, and no matter where you work in an organization, you can have a positive impact on the culture. But I also do think there's a line as an individual where you can't expect somebody to stick it out and to try to change something that's awful and is having a huge personal impact on them.
Yeah, and I think I'm going to see Dara here from Common Purpose. There's a huge amount of discussion in those courses around leading beyond your authority. We can still absolutely try and affect change. We can absolutely, as you say, role model, but also, not be afraid to raise it with your line manager, or if they're the problem with somebody else, always speak to somebody and make sure that actually you are trying to address it, but also kind of not to be totally terrified to call it out, because it's a big deal to have to move jobs and leave because of a person, and they could leave the following week, which would be obviously amazing, and more people should do that. But I'm only joking. I'm a firm believer in humour as well. As you can see, I can't help myself but jump in with a bit of humour. But I do think ultimately, like, it's also a privileged position to be able to feel you can just walk away. And so I don't take it lightly to say run. It was a joke. I think ultimately there are a number of steps within any organizations you should be able to take first. And sometimes it can be just getting a listening ear, whether that's a board member or a colleague or somebody else, and let it filter through. I think people are terrified of things cascading back up, but managing up is a huge part of our jobs, and at every level, no matter what, even when you're your own boss. Totally. So we got to get good at actually making sure that the issues are raised, and they're raised in a very non-personal, professional reportage kind of way, so that it's about things that are happening as opposed to, you know, just unsubstantiated kind of unevidence stuff, and make it really factual and then try and affect change. But if it's not changing and you're there a long time and you feel like you're swimming up the stream every day, then really look at your options. Yeah. Protect yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so we are coming to the end of our chat up here, and we ask this of everyone at our breakfast clubs. What is the best piece of leadership advice that you have received? Give you a second to pull on it.
I think the best I've received is something that Christian Kinnear said years ago, and I think it's come across. Everybody understands psychological safety now in a way that when he told me this, I didn't really. And it was just about trusting freely. I mean, I don't know many people who love to be micromanaged. I don't know many people. I do know some people who like clear direction, of course, but just trust freely is the best advice I've been given, because I think people respond so well to that. If you give them enough clarity, allow them to buy into the purpose, but then really trust them to get on and do it, and then guide them if it's not happening. But trust freely was the best advice that I've been given. And the advice that I always give is just be sound. It's not hard.
Easy to remember.
And I suppose maybe just to respond a little, like I agree, and I'm personally, like, I'm someone who's very trusting, and that can mean that you can then get disappointed at times, but you still, I think it's really important actually to still go back into the next relationship, whether that's personal or professional, still expecting I am the best. But I do think there's something in organizations, and maybe it's been a learning experience for me because I'm a very trusting person, is I do think there's something, particularly when you're the one who's ultimately accountable, in kind of trust but verify. So it's not necessarily micromanage, but I do think as a leader you need to have systems for making sure that, you know, you are trusting people, but that you're also have ways, and that could be culture, you know, you're trusting people to behave in a particular way, that you've ways of picking that up through employee engagement surveys or things like that, whether that's actually how they're leading in their teams, and also on metrics. I do think it's a mixture of both. I would say in terms of leadership advice, I think as a leader you're always growing, and I'm conscious that there are people in this room with so much more experience than me, and people that I've learned a lot from in conversations, particularly when I joined this sector. I see Deirdre Garvey here. It was one of the first people that I spoke to when I moved into the non-profit sector. But I think a key one is to surround yourself with people that challenge you and people that bring different viewpoints. And I think that's both within your organization. I think that's really important, and also within your network. And I think having that network, and that's why these events are so important, is often we find ourselves at all levels in an organization, from the top down, we can find ourselves dealing with issues that we're just not really equipped for, that we haven't been trained for, that we haven't dealt with before. And I think it's really important to be able to reach out to somebody who's already been there and get their advice. So that's why I think events like this, Sinead, are just really important in giving people that network.
Well, you have teed me up perfectly. Thank you. So first of all, thank you so much, Lisa, Nicole and Averil. Thank you so much for your time and expertise today. So we're going to break out into our breakout groups. We have facilitators to facilitate discussion. You might put your hands up for me so we know where everyone is. All right, folks. You don't need to move your furniture back around if you don't want to. If you just want to turn around in your seats, that's grand. We're going to just have a few minutes of Q&A. Thank you so much. I hope you had some good chats there. I heard lots going on. But we're going to take some questions. And the most exciting thing in the whole world is this microphone has been handed over to me, which we have permission to throw at one another. So it sounds like this. So hopefully people can hear me. Okay, so we have to hold it close. How COVID friendly is this? So if anyone does have a question, you can pop up your hand and I'll throw this thing at you and we'll see how I get on. Okay. Are any questions from the floor?
Just to say thank you very much for this morning. It's been a really good event and lots of great conversation. I have a question for both of you, just in relation to organisational culture, but also, I suppose, that whole kind of values and principles piece, particularly as you go through a process of change management and growth, how can you retain or ensure that you retain that good culture and your values and principles are embedded as part of that change management?
So I think the most important thing in any change program is a shared mission and a shared vision of where you're going. And I think, often with change, people can agree that, what we have now isn't right, you know what I mean? And that can be, small bits, or that can be a burning platform and it's collapsing and we all agree that we need to change. But often maybe organizations don't do the work around getting alignment on where we're going. And I think that's really important. And that sounds, it sounds basic, but I've seen that go wrong where you don't actually have that shared view. And we've undergone a major change program over the last few years, and we did a lot of work. And like our strategy development, when I joined, we didn't have a current strategy. Our previous one had expired, and we didn't have a current one. And actually, the chair of our board, the board would have been keen that we get one as soon as possible. And my view, and I'll say in terms of advice that I had from others, was you can't lead that because, you don't know enough about, as a leader, about the organization to be agreeing a strategy. But also you need to get that mission alignment first. So there's no point in jumping in and trying to do a strategy unless you have that. So we took a whole year to develop our strategy to get the mission alignment right first. So like we did workshops with the team around why they've come to work for the Irish Cancer Society, what it means to them, what's important to them, and that I think gave us that shared sense of purpose. And then we did a lot of work on our vision and our ambition and what we wanted to achieve. And I think getting buy-in to that is critical before you do anything else. I think it's having that shared sense of where you're going, and then the how, again, agreement on what the how is. I think change is frightening for people. For some people it's great. And I'm someone who's very motivated by change. And I find it exciting. And I thought, say even COVID, I was like, great, I could do all the stuff that I thought was going to take me 3 years. I can now do it because, nobody can object. We have to do it, so it was actually great. But one of the things I've learned is that lots of people are afraid of change. Yeah. And if you just try to rush them into it, or you think you're just going to inspire them, or you're just going to set that direction and say, come on, guys, now here we go, without acknowledging those fears and giving people a space to be explicit about what their fears are, but, and reassuring them and being clear on where we're going. And being honest about the challenges, because some change will be different. It will be uncomfortable for people. It may mean restructuring. It may mean job losses. It may mean asking people to do things that they didn't have to do before, that they don't want to do. I do think that's easier when you have a shared vision and a shared understanding of why you're doing it. Yeah. But I also think that honesty is really important. So I think there's no point in leading a change program and, not being honest with people about what it will mean for them, what it might mean for some of the jobs in the organization, what it might mean for ways of working. I think you're better off being honest about that at the start than people feeling that you're not being genuine, that you're saying it's all going to be fine, but they know it's not, because you've no trust then. If you don't have trust, you don't have anything else.
And the other thing I was going to build on what Averil was saying there by saying in any change, regardless of the values piece, communication is the number one kind of golden rule. I would say somebody commented to me, obviously been working through a number of mergers and different transitions over my career, and somebody commented to me saying, I've actually seen you communicate nothing to people and they feel really communicated with. And I'm like, yeah, because communication isn't about what message you're giving. It's about actually just making sure people feel in the loop and that you're telling them what you can at a given point and that they know they will hear as soon as you can. And so for me, like, change is terrifying for a lot of people. It's absolutely essential. And therefore, just, one of the key ways to be really honest and to keep them on board is communication. And that's about your values as well. If you're really people-centered, you'll recognize their feelings, emotions, and natural uncertainty, uncertainty, activated fear, and, try and put them at ease, but being honest about that.
Great. Thank you so much, Averil and Louise. Great tips. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any questions? Don't be shy. Yeah, I won't throw this microphone.
Hi, good morning. My name is Deirdre and I work for Junior Achievement. Just something that came up in our group here and I thought of when you were speaking this morning, and I don't want to go off topic, but it does relate to cultures. The additional challenge communication-wise as a leader when you have people working remotely, particularly in a busy environment, you kind of, somebody mentioned in our group that when you think of talking about culture and you envisage people all in the same room or in the same building at least. And I do think that's a huge challenge in the last couple of years.
Yeah. We were talking about that at our group here as well. I'm sure it came up across the room. You know, we have to be creative and find new ways to bring people together and reinvent kind of the opportunity for people to connect in a different way. But the other thing, I suppose, is just recognizing that it is fundamentally different. And, you know, the water cooler may be gone, but, you know, finding ways to allow people to say how they are, even in weekly check-ins or supervision, in monthly, whatever makes sense. And to really ask them, yeah, but no, how are you really, you know, and also things like, you know, we have a virtual kitchen on Microsoft Teams in our very small organization, but it's great because that's the place you're allowed to go. In fact, you know, even now I'm definitely not allowed to ask worky questions. That's I'm having a cup of tea, you know, and people see you popping in and they can join you for a few minutes if you want. So recreating that space, but our job as managers and leaders is definitely much harder. And we've to find ways to make it work, because dragging everyone back 5 days a week isn't the answer here. That ship has sailed, in my opinion. Very strong opinion. So yeah, 100%.
Yeah. I think, you know, I think when you're hybrid, or maybe, you know, a lot of organizations have people in on Monday, I think it's about designing that day to be teamed, you know, to be a team day. I think there's no point in dragging people in to sit in front of a laptop and do things that they could have done at home. That's immensely, it's really frustrating, and people will leave if you're forcing them to do that. So I think when they're coming in, it needs to be about actually the social side. And we had a discussion in our group about, you know, whether people feel team days are, the office days productive because you're catching up and you're having conversations, it's more social. But I will feel very strongly that that is productive, because social connection is really, really important, and relationships are really important. And we all know that, even like, say, from a performance point of view, it's easier to get things done, or to, you know, when you have relationships, and when that is working. So I think actually thinking about your in-office day as being for, you know, for culture, for collaboration, and designing it around that, and having social stuff, having whether that's, you know, coffee morning, or, you know, whatever that is. But we would often do that, like, we've two office days, but we'll often have social events for an hour or two in an office day, so that people can, you're actually programming in time for people to have those catch-ups. I think in a fully remote environment, that's harder, but I agree. I think you need to, whatever your working environment is, you need to schedule time for connection. And it's not about projects. It's not about any of that. It's literally just about human connection.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for the questions. It is 11 o'clock and I won't keep you late, because I'll get in trouble. So thank you again so much to our speakers, Lisa, Nicole and Averil today. Thank you. Forgot to name check at the start, but big thank you to LinkedIn for this community space, which I think we can all agree is pretty fantastic. If you want to get in touch with LinkedIn about using the community space, Ashling's over there in the corner. I'm sure she'd be happy to talk to anyone about it. Also, big thank you to all of our facilitators who have volunteered today. Rob and Claire and Den, who are in charge of AV and social media. Thank you so much. And to the team at the wheel behind the Breakfast Club. So name check for Perrine and Matthew there. He met at the reg desk earlier. And I think a rule of bus for them as well. Getting this show on the road is no mean feat. So that is all from us for now. Thank you so much. Sun's out, so that's good for once. Go out and enjoy it. Thank you all.